Hey Stan, how are you? Hi
Hello.
Joan, lovely to see you. Hey Tom, glad you're here.
Ooh,
Afternoon. Hi, Lucy.
hi there, Tom. Hi, Kwasi.
Good to see you, Akwasi.
Till noon.
Nice to see you too.
How are you,
Hi,
Rich?
Joan.
Nice to see you.
I'm gonna sit in the nook. In the nook.
Nooks are good.
So this is a very full Zoom room, I think. So we're going to give a minute or two for this to grow. I did share with everybody in the waiting room a survey that Lucy is doing, which I will share again a bit later in the conversation. So if I can just ask you all to, hi Barry, mute your mics just so that we can avoid the feedback, but do please keep your camera on if you have the bandwidth for that, because it's really wonderful to see everybody. And I know Lucy is particularly excited.
Hi, everyone. So excited to see so many of you have been able to join us. If folks want to just share their name and where they're based and their work and maybe their organization in the chat, that would be great. We can all get to know each other a little bit. I see we have people from all different industries all over the world. It's so exciting. So yeah, please just drop in the chat.
Sorry, I have no idea who's speaking. But let me just reiterate what she said. Please put your name in the chat and where you're calling from, and what brought you to this meeting. That was really a wonderful reminder for me. Tom, I wonder if you helped me with that. How funny. So. Hi, everyone. We are recording this note. It's great to see everybody here, and I think we have people from all over the world, which is fantastic. Please take a moment to even scroll through the pages and see who's here. These are all your colleagues from this sector and industry. But please keep your phones on mute if you can for the moment, just because things like that do weirdly happen. And lovely to see you. Oh, hello, Louis. Nice to see you. And Oren, Nina. So, yeah, please put in where you're calling from. It's just fantastic. And I am really thrilled to, Lucy and Gerry, you can both unmute. I'm really thrilled to be doing this with Lucy and to be launching the blueprint today. And thank you for joining. I'm going to hand straight over to Gerry. I don't think Lucy needs an introduction. So, yeah, Gerry, the floor is yours. And please put your comments, questions, notes in the chat. Tom and I will be monitoring the chat, and we will have a Q&A time at the end, and so we can really open the floor. So thanks, everyone.
So hi, everybody. Good to see you. I hope you can hear me. It's fantastic to be here. It's been a long wait. And frankly, I don't want to get in the way of, I think, what I think is probably one of the most important pieces of writing about philanthropy, certainly this year, but I think also during last year. And I really enjoyed reading this. I really think we have an opportunity to talk a little bit about what we can expect, but also it's to begin to think about what the next steps might be. And I think Lucy very clearly has asked us to respond to her questionnaire, and I'd really like you to do that. It's great to see so many people there. I don't want to be anything more than a traffic cop at this point. So all I'm going to do is go straight into a couple of questions to get Lucy started, but we will take our lead from her. And obviously we will get round to talking to you about your own questions and so on, but please do use the chat. and Tamsin and Tom are going to help me try and stay on top of it. So Lucy, welcome. Thanks for doing this. I think you can imagine there's been a lot of anticipation. One of the things that, having read your document, I wondered this morning when I was reading Biden's last speech, I was wondering if he'd stolen some of your stuff, because I was staggered by the amount of congruence, if you like, that there was between some of the things he was saying in this final speech and some of the things you have alerted us to for many years. My sense, having read your document, are three things, and I just wanted to throw them out quickly. One is that you have, you're sort of fed up with all of us who don't pay attention to some of the warnings you've given us in the past. And I think that there's a degree of candor and freshness in what you're writing that actually is saying, come on, guys, wake up. And the second thing I thought was really interesting in what you had to say was the fact that you have seemed to have successfully, I think, managed to get the blueprint not to be so US specific or feel that it's only relevant to the US, which I find really exciting. I've been reading the blueprint for a long time, but I found the sort of international nature of this, the fact that we're sort of dealing with a global set of issues, very powerful. And finally, I mean, we know we all are terrified of what's going to happen on Monday. So I wanted to start by just simply saying, you know, I know you thought very deeply about the things you've written. I was wondering if you wanted to say give us some headlights on what you thought is going to happen and is likely to happen. And I know you're not in the prediction business anymore, so I take that very seriously.
Thank you, Gerry. Thank you. And let me formally thank Gerry and Tamsin and the Impact Trust and the Resilience Funders Network and all of you for being here. It's really delightful to see some faces I recognize from a long career and some new faces. So here we are. 4 days before Donald Trump is inaugurated as president of the United States second time. Something that in many ways, I don't want to claim prescience that I don't deserve, but the US has been heading in this direction for a very long time. Not even just 2016. As I've thought about it more and more, I go back to the decision I made in 2010, following the Citizens United Supreme Court case, which changed, sort of opened floodgates of political funding in the United States. And at the time, two things happened, and there's some folks on this call who were part of this. Two things happened. Everyone in the United States who responded to that decision negatively in print focused on its effect on our political system. I wrote an article at the time saying this is actually a real kick in the shins to civil society, to the nonprofit sector as we know it in the US, with all of its flaws, and they're numerous. But this is going to turn nonprofit organizations into money laundering operations for politics. And I've been sadly very correct about that over the last now decade and a half. And it's played an enormous role in the election of Mr. Trump because of the ability to move money in ways that are invisible to the public, which is a very nice thing to have if what you're trafficking in are lies. Let me just pause here and point out that the fact that Mr. Trump has appointed a czar, a word that is inappropriate in the US political system at any time, but he's appointed a czar of AI and Bitcoin, should be a sign to everyone that transparency is dead in the American federal government. There's no interest in this anymore. Bitcoin is designed to hide and to avoid. It's designed to avoid existing institutions and to hide what's happening. And in many ways, I actually think that's where we're headed. Those two words, avoid the institutions of accountability that we built here for over 248 years. I know we're a baby country. We are a baby country, a baby democracy. And hide what's happening. That's where we're going. To your first question, Gerry, you asked sort of what led to the candor in this, and I appreciate that observation. As a writer, I like to think that I've been candid all along, but I clearly haven't been. I haven't been with myself. I haven't been with you. The reason I had to rewrite this document 2 weeks before it went to press, for those of you who've had a chance to look at it, I rewrote a good chunk of it after the election, and it goes into production the 3rd week of November. So that gave me 2 weeks. But I only had to rewrite it because I got it wildly wrong the first time. 49.1% of American voters voted for Trump. 48.3% of American voters voted for Biden, for Vice President Harris. 0% of American voters voted for Elon Musk. But we've got Trump and Musk, Trusk, as I call them. It's very close. If you look at the numbers, the percentages, there was no landslide. There was no mandate. But what has happened since November 6th for the richest, by the richest of that perhaps 48.3%, by the corporate leadership of this country, by the university leadership of this country, and I'm afraid to some degree by some nonprofit leadership of this country, has been to capitulate at a rate that I'm sure has people in countries who have experienced this holding their heads and sobbing. So we're not headed in a good direction. And there doesn't yet appear to be, there's certainly not the kind of horror and in the streets pushback that there was in 2016. What will emerge? I don't know. There will be a fight. There will be opposition. There's a robust opposition in the houses of Congress, but it's entirely unclear to me that the people who occupy civil society professionally know how they're going to stand against this. The people who make up civil society unprofessionally, informally, in our daily lives, which includes many of those of us who are professionals, that's a little clearer to me. That energy, that refusal, led by people in the populations that have never been treated as equals in this country, is as robust and as strong and as vibrant and as important as it's ever been. So there's sort of like two civil societies in the US. There's the formal professional, which I fear for, and there's the informal and actually the true Americans, the people who've worked for hundreds of years to make this country what it claims to be. But there's also something else, and this is why, despite my own personal health issues, I'm really thrilled to have been invited to talk to you and grateful for what I know the Impact Trust and the the network is trying to build here, is that what we really need, I think, and what I'd hoped the blueprints had been doing for the last several years, but I don't know that they have, is to reset our minds about what world do we live in. We don't live in a society where digital systems are optional. They undergird every single aspect of our lives, and they are completely and entirely owned by a handful of individuals. And we have willingly allowed that to happen. We don't live in a world where our international systems of coordination and peacemaking and all of the structures that were built post-World War II to bring peace to a certain part of the world have never done it for the rest of the world. But those systems aren't working. We can't count on them. They don't fit what we really live in. And repurposing them has been too slow. It's necessary, but it may be necessary to completely reimagine them. We have systems that were designed for a planet that we hadn't killed. And they don't work. And the planet's fighting back. And Gerry was just telling me that the city of London is, I think, got a new air ambulance. I'm 500 miles north of the fires in Los Angeles. Our news is full of how movie stars and music magnates and nice people with a lot of money are buying helicopters. Gerry, that story was how David Beckham and the Prince of Wales chipped in and bought London a new air ambulance. We can't live, survive, thrive in a world where we rely on soccer stars and princes. So we don't have any, well, I guess we do. Anyway, we can't rely on philanthropy for ambulances, people. We can't. We need to do this together to make our communities and our countries, our nations, our states, whatever it is, thrive so that we can thrive. Philanthropy cannot be the line of first resort, if that makes any sense. That's a very botched metaphor. It can't be. It's not meant to be. And when we allow it to be, we in fact say to those who've accumulated ungodly amounts of wealth, yeah, you can decide. That's not how 8-9 billion people are going to thrive. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. So I think to the question of why the urgency, I think it's obvious. This is actually, I was thinking about this. I have a few other calls scheduled about the blueprint over the next few months. This is the only one I have where I am confident I can say anything I want. I hope the other people here who are from the United States are going to let that sink in. We've lived our entire lives, especially if your skin is the color of mine, thinking we can say anything we want at any time, thinking we can gather with anyone we want at any time. This has never been true for a significant portion of the United States population. I want to reiterate that. But it's not going to be true for me on Monday. I'm a disabled gay Jew. I'm scared. I'm personally scared. And I want that to sink in for the Americans on this phone call. because that's where we are. At a larger level, at the more actually international level, I think these characteristics of the world we live in and the world we need to be creating for, and that's what I hope we're here to do, is begin to co-create ways of thinking, ways of connecting, who we rely on, how we use our resources. We live in a world on fire. There's rising autocracy around the world. We are utterly and completely digitally dependent, and those systems are not ours. They are not ours. They are not ours. They are not ours. They are not democracies. They are not ours. In the United States and other parts of the world, there is a militant Christian nationalism that has a vision that it is working toward. This may not be as recognizable to those of you outside the United States, but this isn't the incoming administration is the tip of a spear of a movement that is very clear on what it's moving toward. And it is not democratic governance. There is a movement called the accelerationist movement. I strongly suggest you look into this. It's truly horrifying, but they're heading toward monarchy. That's what they want. They want strongman leadership because they see the same planetary disasters we do. And they see the same strength in numbers of the masses and control possibilities of the few. There's an ideology behind this. There are armed militants behind this, and this is a movement. I can refer you to an awful lot of scholarship about this. And now they have people in power in the White House in Washington. So the first mistake we'd make is to think that this is a 4-year transitional administration. That they don't see it that way. And we can't see it that way. And then the last thing that we all share, hinged off the digitally dependent, is that those very same people, many of those very same people, are the ones who are eagerly creating artificial people. I'm going to leave it there and let you do your research on accelerationism. But I want you to be clear that in the US, at least, we haven't just gone through, we're not about to just go through a 4-year presidential transition. That's not what they want. And if we keep looking at it that way, it's going to be very hard to push back. So I think to your question, Gerry, just about sort of why the candor, fear is a good motivator. It has been for me for a while. But there's just some fundamental assumptions we make as people that, are rooted in how we were raised that we really have to kind of shake off. We have to investigate them. The most important page of the blueprint, I should have memorized the page number. I'm just going to flash this up here if it's okay, Tamsin. The most important page in the blueprint is, let's see if she remembers how to share her screen. She does, but she doesn't have the document open. Hold on one second. Bear with me. I have been off Zoom for a blessed long period of time. Give me one sec. The most important page is by Stephen Heinz of the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. This is from his, are you seeing this, Tamsin? Is this? Yep. This is, I think, page 39 in the blueprint. Thank you to the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. It's a way to reset your own mind about whatever domain of work you operate in. And it's about taking apart literally our personal assumptions about the world we live in, because we bring these assumptions to work with us. We expect here in the United States, we white people, that the law will work. the way it says it works. Well, we've just lived through 4 painful years that shows that the law works the way the rich buy the law to work. And we knew that, but now we've lived through it together. So we should assume corruption. Assume it. I'm not happy saying any of this, but I think that's what we have to assume when we are doing our work in our communities, when we are thinking about our national programming, when we are thinking about how to distribute our resources, we're thinking about how to apply those resources. To the degree that we're intersecting with formal institutions of the federal government, assume corruption. Boy, does that hurt to say. Now, there was another part of your question, Gerry, that I just want to touch on, and then I do hope to stop just talking. 2 parts. Let me touch on them quickly that I think I tried to get at in the blueprint, and I hope we can continue the conversations about. One is Gerry pointed out to me that I talk about digital technologies, but what I'm really talking about are people. And I'm really relieved to hear somebody read that back to me. Again, the systems, the big ones, the infrastructure, the power lines, the power grid, we in democracies, we should control those. They're owned by our government. They're not safe spaces. It's not a safe infrastructure for anybody doing resistance work. But building something alternative, using digital technologies, they are, in fact, we do design them. But most of us aren't participating in the space where those are designed. And it's entirely possible that the time has come that we really do need a complete alternative digital infrastructure. You'll hear a lot of talk in the next few years about digital public infrastructure. In some places, that's a real thing. In the United States, it's a fiction, but we could get there. There's some parts that work. Library lending, library connected, that's digital public infrastructure. That's knowledge. That's important. That's key. You know how I know it's key if I didn't know it was key from the heart, from my heart and soul? You know it's key because the Elon Musk is going after Wikipedia and the Internet Archive. That's how you know it's key. Watch what they do, not what they say. I have a new book coming out, not that I wrote it in the last 3 years. Publishing is slow, so it makes it look like, oh, she wasn't sick, she was writing a book. No, I was sick. The book was written 3 years ago, but it'll be out in June. It's about assembly and association in the digital age. And without those rights, folks, we have no civil society. So how these tools change the way we experience those rights, the way we choose who we connect with, and choose who we assemble, and can assemble peacefully in protest. If we can't do those things, we must be able to do those things. And those have been under threat for a decade in this country and for much longer around the world. But we have to design we have to design our protests. We have to design our whatever the nonprofit form of the 21st century is going to be. We're going to have to design those things so that the individuals who are choosing to take that collective action control those things. We don't control them if you build them on Jeff Bezos's infrastructure. You don't control them if you're building it on Jeff Bezos's infrastructure. The illustrator of this year's blueprint is a nice young man named Tom. He's 22. He's a talented, talented artist. And after at least 10 years of telling people, your organization is little more than a file in Amazon's filing cabinet, Tom finally drew me the picture that makes it really clear. It's in the blueprint. I don't remember what page it's on. But our organizations are files in their filing cabinets, and our lives are files in their file cabinets. And so we must build outside of that. We must organize outside of that, around it, and with every attention to the defenses we can use, knowing that some of us will always build on others' infrastructure. But it is really about people. It's the choices we make that shape the technology we use. You have a lot more agency than you think over what technology you use. And finally, to the international part, Gerry, when you say that, I tear up a little, because my aspiration for this always, from 2009 to now, was always, this should be an international conversation. These are global issues. And it's, maybe it's just humility, but I know that there are people on this call, there are people all over the world who have always lived in a world of these assumptions that seem stark to a privileged white woman from San Francisco. They've lived their lives through either an authoritarian regime all along, or a transition from one state to another. That's the expertise. That's what we need to learn from. And we need to do it quickly. We don't have a lot of time. But the expertise of what the future will look like, as it always has been, because remember, this moment is yesterday's future. I'm an historian. I go backwards, I go, oh, it's hard. It's hard to be in my head. But the expertise that builds for equity, for justice, that expertise comes from those that the center pushes out, that the center stands on, because it's what's trying to change the center. It always has. And more than ever in the last 248 years, perhaps I'm going to allude a couple of wars and a few other major moments in that long, century-long comment. That's where the expertise comes from. It is not in the United States. Some of it is in the United States. Let me clarify. Much of it is in the United States. Much of it about democracies failing at this massive level is going to come from people in other parts of the world. And we can learn together, but we need to identify that expertise as being outside of ourselves. So it's 1:30. Let me stop ranting and say thank you, Gerry, for the questions. I didn't, go bullet point by bullet point through the blueprint. It's a document. I hope you'll read it. But mostly I hope it'll make you think twice about what you're doing and find others who are also thinking twice about what they're doing. And maybe we can do it together.
Thank you so much, Lucy, and thank you for such provocative and thoughtful but frank remarks. I'm inclined to say we have a lot of chat already, and there are a lot of people who do want to ask questions. And my next question was indeed going to be, tell us what the most important piece in the blueprint is, and you've already gone there independently of me, so that's fine. I see Stephen is in the audience, so I hope he can take credit for what I think has provoked a lot of us to think about what does one do around international organizations? How do we rethink the whole thing? And I think your last point, I'll stop here and throw it out to the floor. But one of the things I think that's really important is indeed, where is the lived experience? Where are the people with the skill set who are dealing with, for example, we keep thinking about having to respond to things almost as if we are doing it tabula rasa. But there are some people that are at the front end and have been dealing and grappling with problems. And as the polycrisis gets more acute, I do believe it's really important that we start listening to the people who might not have our ears, right? The people we're not listening to, we're not talking to, we're not engaging with, and finding ways to hear from them. And I really do believe globally we need to think again about all the systems and the organizations that we are so wretchedly dependent upon. But I would like to throw this out now. Stephen, do you want to say anything? And then I'll open it up.
Well, first, I'd just like to say thank you. Lucy, it's great to see you, and I'm sorry that you've been struggling with a debilitating illness.
Thank you.
By the way, the whole COVID experience is a reflection of failures of governance and of the global system, of national systems, et cetera. This is really an important piece of work, and I don't say that because Lucy so kindly refers to my own work. But I think the message that Lucy has shared with us today, I thoroughly agree with. I am in trepidation about what may occur starting on Monday. And I don't think we're well prepared for it in philanthropy or civil society. I think that we think we saw this movie before. And in fact, I think it's going to be an entirely new movie. And the reason for that is that in the last iteration of this movie, the director was inexperienced, incompetent, and unwise to the ways of political power. In the 4-year interregnum, he has become wise to all of those things, and he is not allowing anybody into his administration in a meaningful post who doesn't essentially bow down to him in total fealty. And so there will be no adults in the room when fateful decisions are made. The ideological composition of the cabinet may look heterodox, but it's really not, because they've all pledged essentially, no matter what their personal views are, to do what Donald Trump tells them to do. So we are in a very different place even than we were 4 years ago. And I think there is too much complacency, which I think is Lucy's core message. And by the way, this is a global challenge, not only because of the U.S. role in the world, but because the authoritarian playbook is being utilized in so many parts of the world. And we need to learn from that, in particular, a part of the world where I spent a decade in Eastern Europe after the fall of the Berlin Wall. And there are lots of lessons to learn from Hungary and from Poland about how easy it is to impose an authoritarian state and how hard it is to undo it. So I'll stop there, but thanks to everybody for being on this call, and especially thanks to Lucy for her work.
Thanks, Stephen. Gerry, can I respond?
Please.
I appreciate that, Stephen. And I want to actually really put a very fine point on something, because so many of us here on this call, I mean, I think we're all part of civil society. We care about democracy, but there's a very specific kind of shape to the people on this call, which includes people who work for very wealthy philanthropists. And there aren't, although there may very well soon be, very clear lines between very wealthy philanthropists who at their heart and in their institutions care about the same things that we're talking about. But there is a cadre of oligarchs that are truly global. And again, this has been known to us for decades. That makes this, you know, somewhat like the I don't know, the fall, the end of the Ottoman Empire period of time. But we have to deal with the fact that we have emperors, true, you know, imperially minded, wealthier than nation states, devoted only to their own incentive, individuals who can buy governments at a clearance sale of under $300 million. You too could have had the United States presidency. I mean, that is remarkable. And I'm loath to say that anything is new, that there's a that there's a historical precedent for anything. I do believe that. We have to mishmash a few historical principles here, but we have it's truly global because these individuals are their canvas is the globe. And I don't want to name one or two because they're all working together. Several of them are working together, I should say. And I do urge you to do your own. Oh God, I can't even. Anyway, maybe I should put a reading list together for this group. But please read about the accelerationist movement. It's not to be taken lightly. And one of the things, which means one of the things we have to really wonder about are you know, what's international and what's national.
We're talking about such serious things, but actually, Lucy, I loved the fact that you took the time to point us to some novels and to point us to some literature to read in the blueprint that I think actually sometimes is even more powerful, perhaps, and certainly
Well,
some.
nobody does it like Octavia Butler.
Exactly.
If you are in California right now, and you're not wondering how did somebody describe 2024 so perfectly when she was writing in 1985, wow. I mean, to the occupant of the White House, to the fires in Los Angeles, it's all in the book.
Well, there's a message about looking into the future and thinking about how things can be different. And this is probably the question I would have for the whole group here is how do we, I mean, I hear your frustration with the fact that people don't listen, that organizations aren't good at picking up on messages. And I hear that also in some of the things that Stephen was saying. What do we do differently? How can we organize in a really different way so that we're not so caught up in our own little, what the French like to call our own boulot, which is what the way we're built, right? We deal with our set of problems, our set of issues, our silos, our agendas. And how do we get out of that? And maybe this is something that I throw out to the audience, and I don't see any. Well, go ahead, Louis. Can you keep remarks short and questions short, please?
Why should I? Isn't the topic a topic that we should move away from the quick truisms, but take the time to reflect what is actually happening?
Yeah.
I'm sitting here in East Germany, so bit resonating with the question, where's the expertise? Going back to East Germany, where was the expertise? The expertise was next door. And if I look at, or if I listen to you describing civil society and bringing in the distinction between a professional civil society and an informal civil society, for our experience, it feels alien. What kind of structure are we looking at? Isn't civil society my neighbor? Isn't the civil society the people I connect to? And when we say, oh, they work together, well, do we work together? If we look into the realms of philanthropy, what has puzzling me for all the time when I've been working in social transformation and the like is they're all doing their own thing. They're almost to be glorified if they allow their own projects to connect to each other. Do they connect to each other? Isn't that the next chapter for philanthropy? Not only to go back to the social entrepreneurship jargon and say, oh, let's harvest the synergies of working together. It's far beyond that. It is connecting the like-minded. It's connecting not only the like-minded, but practices, experiences, understanding, and bringing that together. I mean, that is the most noble task, philanthropy, the love for humanity is sitting with at this very moment. So if there has been sort of the comfort of dwelling nicely in the self-glorification businesses, now is the time to move out and reach out to each other and have that conversation. What can we do to enable civil society on the level of neighbor to neighbor, community to community, to connect, to grow into a resilience of the communities up to a level where they can laugh about what clown is actually running in office. I'm not diminishing the threat that comes with it. And Germany is not only the history of East Germany, but also the Third Reich. Yes, and we've learned our lessons to what happens if we give all the power to the structure, if we give all the power to the organizations, if we give all the power to give it all away. And we wouldn't have come in Germany out of that darkest period of our history if it hasn't been always the possibility to reach out to your neighbor, to live in those communities where we see humanity shining through, being embraced and being lived. And this is possibly something where we have a great opportunity to do exactly that, to shake off all this sort of structures and headline and all these frames we've been operating in, and connecting human to human, heart to heart, to grow a shared understanding from our core reflected lived experiences in that very moment, providing comfort and hope for each other, and by doing so, walking together through that dark time, knowing that all the dictatorships on the planet failed at some point. And what we can do, taking care of each other to make sure that we get out on the other end as sane and healthy as possible. That was long. Sorry about that, but I leave it here.
That's okay. Thank you for that. That's very good, Lewis. Stephen Pitton, can I come to you?
Hello, Gerry. Yeah, yes. Well, thank you, and thank you to Lucy for that introduction. I mean, I suppose you know, it spoke certainly to how I'm feeling here in the UK, and I suppose a sense of real confusion about where we are, and you know, how strong and big the forces that we have been trying to work with in a positive way in civil society, how strong those forces are. And I suppose my comment on our last contributor was that, yes, that is really important about connecting and working with neighbors and at the local level, but the systems that we're operating with are just you know, getting stronger in the direction that we don't want to go. And I think that's the place where I feel that we do need to have some new thinking, particularly around philanthropy. I suppose I've always been within philanthropy, within a tradition of being in perpetual descent. I've always thought that that's the place that philanthropy needs to be. But even more so now, and that descent really needs to be, you know, we need to strengthen ourselves in that, it seems to me, to be able to make any impact. And of course, I mean, it's very interesting being here in connection with people in the USA, because I think the the way in which the developments in the USA are spreading out. I think we find it here in the UK with Nigel Farage and Reform UK, and even things like our voting system are no longer fit for purpose. You know, when you get the chance of and you know, we have some sense of progress here with a left of centre government, but it was elected on 35% of the vote, and you know, that is not healthy for democracy either. So you know, you find me in a state of confusion in terms of where we go, but it just feels that this kind of conversation is so important, so that we can gain some sort of strength amongst ourselves to be able to face the realities of where we are.
I know, and I mean, frankly, Stephen, you're such a brave person historically that it's really scary to hear you say some of those things. But Akwasi, can I come to you?
Yeah, thank you very much. Lucy, your presentation, I found it to be conceptually very enlightening and analytically very deep. So thank you very much. I talk as an old man. I'm turning 75 years old. I was born and grew up in colonial Ghana. And I've lived in many African countries where we've had dictatorships, military coups, and so on, and been part of youth movements when I was younger for democracy and social change broadly. And one lesson I learned is that paradigm shift, which is what is required right now, comes when the younger generation is fully engaged. So it's not a question, it's a point about the need for those of us who are the older generation, 60 plus, to figure out how we can really help to foster youth cross border collaborations. In other words, transgenerational transmission is critical going forward. Otherwise, the change we dream of isn't going to happen.
Thank you, Akwasi.
I'm going to just jump back in to say that I think both Akwasi and Lewis, I believe it was, I couldn't agree with you more. And I actually think this is one of those places where the learning has to flip. It's the olds, such as myself and you, who need to be in the listening position and the resourcing position, but that the youth understand the digital the environment in ways that I only aspire to, and the ability to connect internationally now has so many more dimensions, so many more possibilities that most of them have explored. And your comment, Akwasi, and Lewis's comment make me think of the banker ladies in Toronto, which is an entirely person-to-person, trust-based, identity and relative position-based alternative economic system that generations of Black Caribbean immigrants to Canada have built, because when they walk into a big bank, or a big white bank in Canada with their hijab on, they're turned away. Now, they didn't stop existing. They've built an alternative existence. They've literally built alternative financial systems, alternative banks. Carolyn Hussein at the University of Toronto has a lovely little film called The Banker Ladies about this. And what I think many of us in our institutional positioning need to do and stop talking about doing, but actually do, is get out of their way. Listen to what they tell us if we're in a position to, and this is a short-term intervention, not a long-term change. It's just a short-term change of behavior. and see if you might be helpful and if you might not. And if you might not, then get out of the way. Get out of the way. We don't get out of the way very well. But I think this is what I mean. I think philanthropy professionals, forgive me all, talk a good game, but we don't play a good game. We want to be the refs and the players and the coaches and the owners and the audience. It's a deep, deep behavior shift. And to Lewis's point, yeah, there is that building of close tissue that's so important. I mean, the loneliness epidemic that white Western countries are talking about on the front pages of their newspaper may be deep. Maybe it's part of us. To Stephen's point, yeah, the pandemic broke a lot of things and continues to break them because it is not over. It is simply going to be joined by a few other viruses.
To this point that Louis raised about communities and so on, I mean, you know, I've often talked about how important the institution of rotating credit and burial associations are on the African continent, all over. These are resilient, inventive, creative, agile institutions that hold, in fact, the membrane of the continent together, and actually are mostly women-led. They really are an interesting. And I'm just wondering, when you talk in your blueprint about the rebirth of mutual and reciprocity, and I'm wondering if you could just say a few words about that.
So again, I think these are values and ways of behavior that thrive in the most marginalized communities, the communities that are most oppressed. I'll use the real language, that are most racially or for other reasons sidelined, because those people live their lives. Those people in those communities live and survive and sometimes thrive, and they've built systems that make that possible, often in parallel to what we think of the financial system or the political system or the housing situation or whatever it is. And we're all in that situation now. I mean, one way to think of it, I don't know if this is going to be helpful or not. I'll say this and then I might take it back, so don't write it down. If you prepare for the worst, right? The worst is a set of global oligarchs puppet stringing the rest of us. You know, 1,000 people making decisions that affect 8 billion. That's the truly worst. That is what they want. That is where they're headed. Again, I've given you a buzzword to go find it. Then we're all on the margins. We're all on the margins. And our own survival depends on building enough trust with those who've been surviving all along that they will share some of their expertise with us. Not demanding it, not paying for it, not buying it off with philanthropic dollars or perverting it with a new organizational structure, but actually building enough trust that someone will share with you personally and include you in what's going on. That's why, you know, the new attention to mutual aid is beautiful. It's a lovely thing. I'm glad it's happening. It is not a new, mutual aid is not a new phenomenon. I mean, my God. If you really draw your historical imagination backwards, folks, mutual aid is where we started. And then we gave ourselves kings. Or we didn't really pick them, but, you know, and I'm not going to go through 5,000 years of history for us, but caring for your neighbor and building a system that keeps you housed and fed and sheltered and safe is a human habit that some of us have been able to offload over centuries. And some of us have had to work hard to build every day of our lives. Oh my God, I silenced 300 people.
I don't think so. Barry, do you have anything you want to say? Barry Knight.
Thank you. Yeah, somebody put in the chat about facing collapse, and I think that when we look at where we are, we are at a really critical moment. And I think one of the things I reflect on, I'm not a historian like Lucy, but I do love history and do try and study it. But the right has been organizing since 1938. Good Society Symposium, Walter Lippmann, written up in a wonderful book by Richard Cockett called Thinking the Unthinkable, and a book in 1996 predicting all this, William Rees-Mogg, The Sovereign Individual, where he foresaw the collapse of society, and the only people that would survive would be sovereign individuals. And we had to become sovereign individuals. And that is what this is heading. I had the privilege of interviewing Noam Chomsky in 1994, and he said to me, the world oligarchs are organizing a slave society where they rule and we all serve. And I walked out of that room thinking he was balmy, but I'm afraid he was right. And I think the one word I would say we have to now put on the front foot is organize. We have to organize. We have to organize differently. I mean, one of the most successful meetings was held in 1947 in Mont Pelerin, where 36 people went and spent. They were all white men, by the way, and they plotted the future against the civilization that had emerged in the Second World War. We have the resources. We are rich. We have philanthropy. We have civil society. We have capacities, intellectual, moral, relational. We need to step forward. This is a moment to stand up and to find, let's go to Bacantico. Let's have a working group. Let's actually organize across continents. We have Philea, we have the Council on Foundations, we have institutions. Let's actually activate ourselves. Let us stop funding damn silly projects in short life bursts that really don't have any effect. And if anything, I've actually disabled the global South through our top-down dirigiste interventions that have actually undermined civil society in so many places and led to the kind of anger that actually leads to people rebelling against centrist and left-wing politicians, because we haven't delivered. We have not delivered a world that is, the Gini coefficient has been going up persistently since 1977. That's obviously cut the heart out of our societies. We really need a different way of organizing. And we're very good at talking, but we're not so good at doing. So let's organize some meetings. Let's put some resources into strategic intervention to actually find a new narrative that will resonate with people and actually organize ourselves so that we begin to actually do what Louis said, which is actually talk to our neighbors and not kind of hang back and think, unless it's been invented here, it's not worth doing. We have got the institutions, we have got the capacities. We need to step into that space in a different kind of way. And this sort of meeting, which has been really, really good, is the kind of vehicle that we need. We can do this through the technology. And I mean, I don't understand. Lucy said something which I think is really important, which I haven't heard before, but let's invent our own technologies. We don't need to rely on the, on the Apples and the Googles of this world. We can do things our own way. And that's, I think, the challenge that we face.
Thank you for that. I'm struck by a couple of things you said. Akwasi put in the chat his philosophy about organize, which I hope he will repeat at some point. But John, is that how to pronounce your first name?
Yes, yes, it is.
Go ahead, please.
I've missed what Kwasi has put in the chat. I would like to see it actually. I'm responding though to the last sharing, and also to just say thank you to Lucy. Especially I'm intrigued by this, the banker ladies, because one of the things I'm faced with, and I think many of us might be also, I'm working with Environmental Defenders Collaborative, and we're sending emergency funds to individuals as well as to groups, community organizations that are trying to defend their territories and civil society. And we're thinking about how to send money, how to send funds at this point internationally. Who is going to, be able to do that? And perhaps the idea of creating alternative technologies is a grand one, but I know it's also probably very costly and time consuming at this moment. People are in such emergency. But if there is anyone else on the call who's interested in trying to work together, and I do mean work together on this idea and difficulty of sending money internationally through banks that obviously are going to be heavily impacted by all we're talking about today, please let me know. And thanks again. This is just an extraordinary call, and Lucy, so much gratitude and just respect for all you're doing. Thank you.
Judith Simmons, you wanted to come in?
Just a moment, if you don't mind. As you know, I've been sending notes to you that I think all of these webinars have been extraordinarily enriching, and I very much appreciate Lucy, as I always have, and Stephen Hines and all of you who have been working. But I really think what Barry has said, to summarize, and our last speakers, we have to act. We must. We just did a major survey globally on pursuit of the common good. And there's a lot going on, but people need to get together now, connect and act. What is most depressing, and as someone who teaches, is to see that we seem to be living in a world that is resigned to live through this for 4 years. And as Lucy pointed out, it's not going to be 4 years. It's what this Barry was saying. We're going in the wrong direction. We must bring all this power and activity together, and together soon, to really speak up before it is too late. And I think all of us are ready to work on this and work together. And thank you very much, Gerry, for leading these groups.
So the big question is, do we have the organizations? I mean, it's come up even in the chat today. And Lucy held up Stephen's kind of list, I think, of the things we really need to do something about. And the question is, do we have the organizations? Can we build on the infrastructure that's there? Is it able to do this, or do we really need to have to invent it? And I guess I throw this out to everybody, but Lucy, maybe you have some thoughts about this.
Yeah. I think I want to go back to what I said about really interrogating yourself, because the language on this call is great. It's wonderful to hear people saying, yes, we need to connect, we need to build international networks, we need to think about the technology, we might need to build some. There are people all over the world who are already doing this.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need you. They don't want you. So, and my mother is yelling at me from above. I'm not supposed to point my fingers at people. They don't need me. They don't want me. The question for me is, how can I change me so that I will be trusted enough to be taken into their confidence and allowed to participate in their systems that they've built? And what can I bring to them that's helpful? And I can tell you right now, I, Lucy, do not know the answer to those questions, because the answer to those questions comes from, in my case, the community I've become most connected to over the last several years, which is the community of people coming into this country from Spanish-speaking countries who do not have the papers that Washington, D.C. thinks makes them human. And inviting those a family into my home to shower on a regular basis, because San Francisco thinks it's okay for a family with young kids to live in the gym of a local elementary school. And we have built a relationship with this family. They know the systems they're navigating. They know what they need. And eventually, they may trust us enough to invite us in. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, and excuse me, I'm going to use a shorthand that is rude and accurate. The white people with financial resources on this phone call do not need to start these things. We need to build the relationships, build the trust, make our own selves very uncomfortable, and either get out of the way or stand behind and follow a very different kind of leadership. And it takes changing ourselves at home to change the institutions we build. I believe that. So there was a lot of talk. This chat is fabulous. I apologize for my tone. I'm not sure we have the networks we need. And I'm not sure having a youth forum at another philanthropy conference is going to make a whit of difference. Because how many have you been to? And how different is your work? How about having a philanthropy forum at a youth conference? I mean, that's got to be the easiest flip, because it's not racialized, ableized, genderized. If you look like the people we're talking about being different from, then you need to change your own personal way of behaving. And I know there are people here who do this much better than I do, and it's really legitimate, and it's a true part of their personality. But face it, folks, we look like the folks we're opposed to, and we look like that to the people who don't look like us. And they know it, and they don't see any difference. Philanthropy is nobody's good guy in this dynamic, except ours. We think we're the good guy. Are we really the good guy? Civil society, nonprofit institutions, we think we're the good guy. We are not the good guy. We are full of the bad guys. From Hitler to Musk, they've used the institutions of civil society to install themselves, and they here are authoritarian leadership. It's not at the level of rhetoric that the change has to come. It's just not. We've been doing that. If you've done it, let me put it this way. I'll stop. I'm not supposed to get excited. Not good for my health. If you've done it before, then whatever your new idea is, it's not new. If you've done it before, it's not new. You did it already, right? It didn't work. I'm going to stop, Gerry. My doctor's calling.
Okay, I hear you, and I thank you for being so honest with us. And secondly, I think a little bit of anger and frustration with our world is in order. What I want to say is that we're coming to the end of the talk, and I know, Eva, I'm coming to you next, so relax. But I just wanted to say three very quick things. One is Tamsin has thought of having this conversation continue, and so next week we have one without sort of a keynote speaker. I hope you'll come back. I hope you see that as a continuation. I mean, I was talking to my wife before we started, and I was saying how nervous I was about the fact there would be 300 people. And she said, well, they're all adults. They'll realize that you can't talk about these serious things in an hour and a half and feel satisfaction. So I think if we're not satisfied at the end of this, it's okay. If we're angry, it's okay. If we're motivated to do something, it's okay. So I'm okay with the level of tension and frustration in the room, because we're not talking about easy stuff that you can just fix like this, right? This is about serious failures, repeated failures, and how do we engage differently. And so we have to have a certain level of frustration with this. And I thank all of you for having participated. It's the last thing I'm going to say, except for just to remind you that you need to fill in Lucy's questionnaire, not because she needs it, because we need it. We need to see, what do we do with something like this? Do we continue it? Do we not? Does it go on? Does she continue to put in the energy in writing this when she feels nobody's listening? Let's ask ourselves that question. And Eva, now I come to you. Go ahead.
I hope I'm not having the last word here. But I wanted to, well, first of all, thank you for this conversation. I actually think we need more of these spaces, because we're human beings with all our fears, emotions, our hopes, and connecting in this way is also building community. I wanted to quickly respond to the question of, do the institutions already exist, or do we need to create them? I think they exist. We understand more and more that we need to work collectively, that we need to understand ourselves as an ecosystem, but also that we're part of these same systems and that we are upholding these systems through our practices, right? But these questions are being answered, and we continue to do that. Large parts of philanthropy are trying to hold ourselves more accountable. So I just want to also, again, uplift next week's conversation, because that hopefully, with a constructive mindset, will help us to start to feel a little bit less hopeless, right? And become more constructive and think about how we can do this together. So really looking forward to that conversation. And I also wanted to say, for this to really work, we need to learn from those that have been there for a long time, as Lucy has said several times, those who've been grappling with this, who have resisted this, and who are here for us to listen to. So thank you again for the conversation, and we'll pass it back to you, Gerry.
Thank you. So we're waiting for who's going to have the last word. I don't know if we want to pass it back to Lucy. Can I just say, the drawings in the book have made me happy. On Monday, when I'm watching the inauguration, I will be thinking of that Tesla parked outside the White House that's in the book. It made my day, because I thought it captured beautifully what I think we're up against. But if there are no hands up, I'm going to... Tamsin, is there something you'd like to say, given that you'd be the backbone of all of this?
No, good, Gerry. I think, Eva, thank you for raising up next week's conversation with Lucy and other networks, Wings, EPASA, Philae, and thank you, Lucy.
Thank you all.
Nina, you've got your hand up. Why don't you say what you need to say?
Oh, thanks, Gerry. I really appreciate it. I love, Eva, your leaning into these conversations. I would like to challenge us that I don't think philanthropy is actually making the changes writ large that need to be made. And that's not a criticism. It's a call to action, because I think we're too easy easily satisfying ourselves. Those of us who have power don't give it up easily. It's very hard to give up. But I just want to not call you out, Eva. That's not the point. The point is to call philanthropy into, because I don't believe it's actually making the necessary changes and holding itself accountable. So I'm all in for that. Sorry.
Thank you, Nina. Lucy, we're going to give you the last word. We have 10 minutes, but we don't have to go all the way. So,
well, I feel like a scold, but I do believe that you joined the call because you wanted to learn something or talk about something you knew but hadn't had a space to talk about, and that's a good thing, that we can change. I think Nina, put her finger on it exactly correctly. It sums up an enormous amount, which is to say that anyone with any power doesn't give it up easily. And even when you don't feel like you have much power, the people on this call have power, and it is contributing to the problems we collectively face. And it is a great opportunity to imagine something different, to think about what we do know how to do, and they're very skilled and talented people here, and what resources we do have, we can use in new ways with new people toward a different future. I think it's also very important to be clear for ourselves what we want that future to look like. One of the reasons the right, and I mean that globally, politically right-leaning folks, especially those at the far extreme of that, they know what they want. They're clear on what they want the world to look like. And it doesn't ignore the very same set of issues that we started with. It recognizes climate change. Their vision recognizes that the planet is in danger. It recognizes that AI will displace thousands of people and there's no other work for them to do. It recognizes that religious fundamentalists with guns are a powerful force and distributed militias are very effective. It recognizes all of that, their vision. They're not ignoring it. They're not stupid. They're building on it. Their vision accounts for it. But what does our vision account for? And what does our vision need to be achieved? Do we have a shared vision? I'm assuming we have a shared vision. And no one has said to me, your vision is, what are you talking about, Bernholz? This is the best thing that's ever happened to America, is what's going to happen on Monday. 49.1% of my voting countrymen either think that, or we're going to find out in the future when this is history that in fact they didn't, and we might find that out. But this is what we got. And half of the people, every other person I meet who voted for this. So they know what they were looking for, but I don't know that we even know what that is, that we could say, yes, we're all willing to work differently and work together toward X. I will put aside my fiefdom. I will put aside my power. I will put aside my title. I will put aside my free access to a recording technology and an AI recorder that I know is going to be saved on the servers of a company that I have no access to. And when Elon Musk decides that it is in fact time to start digging into all those things, this entire conversation will exist in perpetuity for him to do so, which is why I mean it when I say that I think my conversations about this after Monday may be quite different. I mean it. I'm scared. I have to be very honest. I learned only in the last 3 years of my life, when I've become disabled, just how powerfully privileged I have always been. And how everything I did in my daily life assumed a certain type of life. I can't do it anymore. The world doesn't work for me anymore. This world does not have room for me in my wheelchair. I've learned to be a very different person. And I didn't think I was doing so badly till age 58. I hope you don't have to go through what I went through. I fear that you will. So let's get going now and make it a better place.
So Lucy, one of the things that as you come to the end of that very, very powerful reminder of some of the realities, I think one of the things I feel this conversation has done for me is that it's made me feel that there is no way we can be without a blueprint. So, you know what, ma'am? I know it's tough, but I think there's a role for a blueprint next year, and maybe we should all be conspiring together to make sure that that blueprint is not a blueprint of doom and gloom, but is actually a blueprint of what Akwasi was saying: organize, organize, organize. And I do think, you know, if we take the message, then maybe we need to be resilient with this community. And this is a community I'm pretty much anxious to keep going and grow. And I hope maybe the people in this call will help grow the community. We'll need to figure out ways of being able to listen to each other in better ways. But frankly, groups of 20 or 30 are going to need to become groups of 100, and then groups of 1,000, and then groups of 10,000. And we need to start really building this community. And it can be virtual. It doesn't have to all be in one country at one time. But it's a clarion call, and I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional. I'm gonna stop here. I just want to say thank you for participating. I know this hasn't been easy, but I don't think we had any illusions it would be. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the truth speaking, and thank you for the disagreements and the different visions, but we all need each other. Reciprocity is where I believe we have to go to make things work. And that's what's going to make us resilient. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Please join us next week. Lucy, a huge thank you. Thank you for doing this.
My pleasure. Thank you all for everything you do.
Thanks, everyone. See you next week.